At the Meadows Church, we believe who we are and what we do is based upon our beliefs of who God is and what He's done for us. This is the gospel. God is the Father who made us His family. God is the Son who saves us and calls us His disciples. God is the Spirit who sent Jesus and now sends us as missionaries. We are a family of missionary disciples. And therefore we do four things. We gather on Sunday mornings. We go as missional communities. We grow as DNA groups, and we give of ourselves, our time, our talent, and our treasure. We are the Meadows Church. Therefore, we ask you to join us as we join Jesus on His mission to see the gospel transform lives in our neighborhood of Church of Meadows, our city of Mississauga, and all around the world.
My name is Pastor Graham, and I just want to welcome you to the Meadows Church Online as we gather on Sunday morning. Hopefully you're watching this live, and if not, watching it back again. We love to have people join us live on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Hopefully you're there. And if you are, let us know on the chat section. Comment. We love just to know that we're not alone in our homes just kind of watching this. We're watching it together as a community and as the body of Jesus. And so let's celebrate this morning. There's lots we can thank God for, no matter what your week was like. And that's exactly what we want to do this morning. We're here to praise Jesus, to lift His name high, to sing, to pray, to fellowship, to encourage one another, and ultimately to look in God's Word and be encouraged about living our lives for God this week. And so thank you so much for making that decision to join us as a church and follow after what God is calling us to do. It is our mission to reach this neighborhood of Church of Meadows that we're in, and the surrounding areas here in Mississauga. And so thank you for joining us in that. And we're just excited to see what God is doing in our church and through our church in the neighborhood around us. And so join us. We're excited. Hopefully you are too. Let's ready our hearts to hear from God today and rejoice together as one church. Let's get this started.
For you always by my side.
We always say at the Meadows Church that we give because Jesus has given first. And he's given us his life, he's given us our lives, and he's just being generous with everything that God owns. He's created all of this and given it to us. And so, as the same way, we as followers of Jesus also want to be generous with our money. And so, just another encouragement for us, as we always do each and every week. We want to be generous with our neighbors, with our friends, and with the church, and as a church as well, to bless those around us. And so just encourage you to go on and give your offerings this week at themeadowschurch.ca/give. And I just want to also make another kind of big push and encouragement. We made a big push, and a lot of people jumped on board with giving online, especially on a regular basis. We have an automatic withdrawal you can set up. You set it what you feel like God has asked you to give. And we did that right when COVID started, and that worked out well. And I just want to give another kind of shout out to that and encourage you. It's very simple, it's very easy, convenient, but also just helps you stay faithful to that commitment that you feel that God has called you to give as a family to God and his ministry. And so I just want to encourage you to do that this morning. Also, we've been making this big push for the last week and a half for you to encourage your friends, encourage your neighbors to join us here online on Sunday morning, or even throughout the week. We got lots of videos going out and lots of encouragement and lots of just things that we're doing to pointing people to the hope that people desperately need now. And this is just a very simple way that you can take part, is to come grab these cards and pass them out door to door. You can pass them out to families that you know or families you don't know. Just want to strongly encourage that you do that either in your immediate area or here in the neighborhood of the church. And we still have some of these flyers left. I'd love to see them be gone by the end of today. But I just want you to reach out, send me a text today. Or email and just let me know how many cards you want, and if you can pass those out, that would be excellent. And lastly, it's now our 4th week going on this, and it's working really well. I just want to encourage all the parents in the church that we have kids Bible time at 11 a.m. right following the service. It's great. It's a lot of fun. It is for kids of all ages. We try our best to accommodate all of them. But as well, if you know of anyone that would like to join, again, it's about 20-25 minutes of Bible time for kids. It's fun, interactive. We're using a new app called Kahoot just to do some quizzes and games. And so even if you know anyone who might be interested, send them the Zoom link, let them know, and we'd love to have them join as well. And so again, that is at 11 o'clock. We'll move on again to the next one of the key segments that is just new and being developed, and we'd love to see more of these new segments developed too. But this is one that we love. I know I do. With Haley and I just talking about parenting, and we were just starting off a new kind of 2-part series talking about grace. And so just let's enjoy and watch that. And for anyone, not just kids, let's just take it to heart and see what God does through this.
Welcome back, everybody.
This is our next segment, and we're actually doing a 2-part series. This is the first one in our 4-minute parenting segment here, and we're going to be talking about Haley's favorite topic. What is that?
Grace.
Grace. And why is that your favorite topic?
Because it's my middle name.
So Haley, got a big question for you. Why do you listen, not that you always listen, but why do you listen to Mommy and Daddy?
Because if you don't listen to your mommy and daddy, you break Jesus' heart.
She's got all the good answers today. I want you to actually say an answer that's not so perfect. Okay, let's try this one last time. Haley, why do you listen to your mommy and daddy?
Because I don't want to get a timeout.
Good. Okay, that's the answer I was hoping she'd say. Because it's also the answer that is kind of the wrong answer.
What do you mean?
Well, we're going to be talking about this topic of actually being motivated by grace. So grace is all about getting what we don't deserve. We kind of mentioned this before in this parenting segment. And we want to use that as a motivation. Typically, in parenting, we motivate based on 3 things: fear, guilt, and pride. And so, fear is don't do this or this will happen to you. Guilt is like don't cause me trouble, or that kind of thing, kind of laying on some sort of future consequence. And then pride is really about do this because this is what good people do, or don't do that because you don't want to be a bad person. And so typically that's kind of all parenting. You see it all the time. You see it in Walmart. You see it in public, and it's our kind of default. And the reason is because it's quick and easy, and it gets typically immediate results. But it is cheap, and it has definitely long-lasting effects on characters. But Haley's got a verse for us, a memory verse today. She's going to read from Ephesians chapter 2.
For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not doing
Of your own doing.
It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast.
Good job. And so when we come to, again, our understanding of God as the Father and us as His children, God motivates us by grace. And so that's what we want to do too.
Yeah.
I would say that the kind of all religions are kind of based on this framework that if you don't obey God, you don't get things from God. And if you do obey God, then you will get things from God. So, for example, if you listen to Jesus, or if you listen to God, you'll get into heaven. If you don't listen to God, you won't get into heaven. And so it's kind of based on a reward type system. A lot of my Muslim friends will often ask, if God just forgives you for everything and it's just through faith and just believing in Him, then why would you ever want to do good? So Haley, why should we even follow and love God?
Because Jesus loved us first.
And so that's kind of the key thing. We actually are motivated to serve God because He loves us and because He's forgiven us so much. And so in the same way, the reason you should love your parents is because, well, first off, God's love for us, but then second is our parents' love for us as well.
Yeah, that's the correct answer.
Love means finding your happiness in someone else's happiness. And really, as Christians, and something for parents to do and to teach our kids is we should find our happiness in God's happiness for us. And so that's what it means to motivate by grace. Again, don't manipulate, don't use fear or guilt or pride. It's easy, but it has devastating effects. You'll get there when you're in therapy in 20 years from now.
Ooh.
We're going to encourage you as parents, again, motivate by grace, even as spouses. And even as kids, use grace, use love. That is the strongest motivator that we can have. This is ultimately God's motivation to us to love Him as well. So, we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Sing it one more time. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, the cornerstone, we made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When darkness seems to hide His face, I'll rest on His unchanging grace. In every heart gale. My anchor holds within the veil. My anchor holds within the veil. The Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love through the storm. He is Lord, Lord, Lord. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love through all the storm. He is Lord, Lord, Lord. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, that I may in him be found. Trust in his righteousness alone, faultless stand before the throne. Christ alone, the cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love through the storm. He is Lord, Lord, Lord.
Over this time of COVID-19, one of the big interesting debates that has come out that we never would have necessarily thought of before is what businesses or organizations are essential. What are deemed to stay open? What should close? What should kind of open in phase 1 versus phase 2 versus phase 3? It's a big question, and it kind of puts people in a little bit of different perspective of am I really essential to this country or not? And as Christians, one of those interesting things that we begin to think about and debate is the church essential for our country? So far, churches haven't been able to open up. There have been a lot of other things, including IKEA and beer stores and various other amenities that we would probably look at and honestly agree, you probably don't need Swedish furniture at this point in time. But how are those deemed essential versus others are not? Now, again, there are variabilities in regards to what can be practiced safely versus what is not, but it still comes back to the same question: is what is essential, what is important, what actually has value in our country when all things go crazy? And as a church, I want us to think through that question today. It's something that our world's debating, politicians are debating, and even we need to debate as well. And it's interesting enough, in our passage today in Acts chapter 24, there is a trial taking place. Now, it's the Apostle Paul who's on trial, but really we can say that it is the gospel, or we can say that the movement of Jesus, the church, that is also on trial. Is it good for the world, or is it some sort of plague, something that is not needed and actually could cause harm? Again, there are opinions about this that vary all across the spectrum, from very, very good and essential and the most important thing to, it's okay, but yeah, when things are going difficult, we can close it down. It doesn't really matter. Or even on the other side, where, yeah, this is evil. We need to completely close it down no matter what. Maybe you have friends, family, neighbors who fall somewhere in that spectrum. But that is the big debate and question for us. And so we're going to open our Bibles to Acts chapter 24. We're going to go through the entire chapter today, and we're going to divide it into 3 parts. kind of the three parts you would naturally probably see in a trial. First, you have the accusation, right? The people coming and saying, this is why this person should be charged. And then you're getting the defense, well, hold on a second, here's my side of the story. And then we'll get a verdict in the end. And so we're going to divide up our passage here in chapter 24 into those three key categories. But before we jump in and read, let's just remember the context about what is happening. The Apostle Paul, he came back to the city of Jerusalem, which was the start of Christianity, right? That's where Jesus died, where he rose again, where the church began and was sent out. And now Paul, again, that's where he started too. But then he started by hating the church and murdering Christians and again, being on that far side of the spectrum, that this is evil for our society and needs to be stopped at all cost. But then the resurrected Jesus appeared to Paul, drastically changed his life, went from one extreme to the other, got saved by Jesus by believing that Jesus in fact did raise again from the dead, and then became one of the main people, the face of Christianity, going about sharing the good news of Jesus, convincing people that it is in fact good news. But as he comes back to Jerusalem after many of these years, people are upset with him because many of the people who've converted to Christianity are Jewish. And as he comes back, he is not welcomed back with a warm welcome. In fact, people try to kill him. And then the Roman soldiers who are governing the area, they come in and they save Paul and they put him in prison, a little bit for his own safety too. And then there begins to be a plot to kill Paul. And Paul hears about it. That's what we looked at last week. And then they go to the tribune, the leader of the kind of Roman soldiers in the city of Jerusalem. And the tribune sneaks Paul out with 500 soldiers in the middle of the night with great protection and brings him to the city of Caesarea, which would be one of the kind of the bigger cities at this point in time, kind of governed by the Roman Empire. And this is where we find Paul on trial before the governor of the region, Felix, and this is what we're going to look at today. So first, let me open up in Acts chapter 24. I'll start in verse 1. And again, we're just going to go till verse 9 and look at this first section, the accusations against the Apostle Paul. It says in verse 1, "And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul. And when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, 'Since through you we enjoyed much peace, and since by your foresight, O most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation. In every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world. He is the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarites. He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him everything of which we accuse him.' The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so." So we see this story where the Jewish leaders, the high priest, they all come up to Caesarea, and they bring with them someone called Tertullus, which, based on his name, you can already probably tell that he wasn't Jewish. He, in fact, was probably Greek. And therefore, wasn't someone who was necessarily on the Jewish people's side, but he seems to be kind of a hired gun, probably a professional lawyer, a professional spokesman, that they spend money to use him as kind of the secret weapon to try to push their agenda against the Apostle Paul. Again, they want the Apostle Paul dead. They want him to be cut off, to be ended. And their only way to really do that is to convince the Roman Empire to bring about that judgment on Paul. And so Tertullus, very interesting enough, we see in verses 2 and 3, he kind of, sucks up to Felix. He says a lot of these things about the Governor Felix, like that he's been great, that he's been excellent, that most merciful, and we've enjoyed your peace and your oversight. That's actually a blatant lie. This is like sucking up to the principal or the teacher to kind of get them on their side. History actually shows us that Governor Felix was one of the worst governors for the Jewish people at this point in time. He was known for someone who would take bribes, who hated the Jews. And so for the Jews to come and talk to the governor in such a way, you knew that although they hated this governor, they hated the Apostle Paul and they hated Christianity even more. And so he makes this case and he calls Paul a plague, and that's something we're going to come back to. A plague is, is something almost close to a pandemic, right? Something that no one wants. No one would want to be called that. You've ruined everything. You bring about death. You cause chaos and destruction, right? That is how the Jewish leaders at this point in time have viewed Christianity. And at the same point in time, you, again, probably have people that live around you that hate the church, that hate maybe even just any kind of religion, and they think that religion is the source of all evil. Again, interesting enough, those people who make that argument need to take a very clear look at history. Although, yes, religions have caused wars, actually the number one kind of source of death and chaos has actually been the absence of religion. It has been countries who have looked at communism, who have pushed aside religion and have basically made their own worldview, casting away God and casting away religion. Those have been the nations who have killed millions and millions and millions of innocent people over our history, especially in the last 100 and 120 years. And so these are the accusations that the Jews bring up against Paul. But we're going to see Paul, he's not quiet, he doesn't stand still, he doesn't keep his mouth closed. Like Christians, like what we should do as a key example here, Paul actively defends himself, and he tries to convince the governor for sure, but even the Jewish people, that in fact he's not a plague, but Christianity is actually a profit to them. It is actually for their benefit. It is a profit to them, their nation, the world. It is good for us all. And so let's read Paul's defense in verse 10, going all the way to 21. Let's look at this. It says this. It says, "And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, 'Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense.'" There we go. Paul doesn't suck up to him, but does address the governor. He says, "You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogue or in the city. Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything that was laid down by the law and written by the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. So I always take pain to have a clear conscience towards both God and man. Now, after several years, I came to bring alms, to bring about donations to my nation and present offerings. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you to make an accusation, should they have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council. Other than this one thing that I cried while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today." Paul makes sure that what he is defending is not just himself, but is the gospel. He claims here that he is innocent, and that's probably the first step of the equation. We need to live innocent lives. As you remember, Paul thought clearly, not just by himself, but with the church and with the elders. He submitted himself to the leaders of the church and said, hey, what should I do here? And it was based on that understanding and that wise action that Paul can stand there in court and claim that he was, in fact, innocent. He didn't start a riot, that it was actually the Jews, that he didn't come to cause chaos, that was the Jews. He wasn't there to stir anyone up or accuse himself of being a ringleader and start something new. That was the Jews who did all those things. And so Paul himself claims to be innocent. And again, as Christians, I do think that we also need to be bold to make a defense. When we hear accusations, now we don't need to be the main person to shut down everyone's accusations and everyone's defense. But at the appropriate time, we need to speak and speak clearly. Again, first, we must be innocent so we have a ground to stand on. But then we also need to defend our actions because of this main reason, that Paul himself is not defending himself to escape punishment, but he is defending himself to prove things are true about Jesus. So in the same way, Paul is not just defending himself, he's ultimately defending Christ, defending Jesus and the gospel, and that should be our motivation behind it all. Now, we want people to see that the gospel is good, that the gospel is true, that the gospel is what everyone actually wants and what everyone actually needs and what everyone should accept if they truly actually understand what it is all about. Like Tertullus, a lot of people in our world see Christianity, whether it's Christianity or organized religion, but they see Christianity as a plague. And Paul here wants to show them that it is actually for their profit. And in the same way, for us as Christians, that is the goal of our defense. It's interesting. There's been a trend that's been happening over the last several years where we have seen predominant popular atheists, people who don't believe in God, deny the existence of God, actually beginning to come out and claim that Christianity has actually been essential for the development of the Western world. Look at these. There's several examples, but it's so interesting to see, again, in this post-Christian world that we're beginning to live in, especially in Canada, where our culture has moved past kind of the majority of belief in Christianity. And in this world now, secularists and atheists are actually beginning to speak out and saying, well, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That they will still claim that, Christianity isn't true, but they will actually still say it is necessary. And so they won't actually say that there's a God and that Jesus is actually God himself, but they will look at the historical evidence over the last 2,000 years and say that it is so necessary for our nation and for our society to continue to grow towards being a greater good. There is a popular secular atheist historian named Tom Holland, and he wrote a recent book just released in the fall, and it was called Dominion: How the Christian Revolution Remade the World. And in it, he writes of various compliments, major kind of support and backing for Christianity, even though he has nothing to do with it and does not believe in the truth behind it. He himself will go about it to great lengths to actually show how much our world today needs to give 100% credit to Christianity. We often forget, living in the 21st century, that just how terrible the world was even 2,000 years ago. In the Roman Empire, abuse, sexual abuse, mistreatment of children, killing of babies simply because you didn't want them, the absence of caring for children, slavery, all these things not just were accepted but were promoted. And we might say, well, that was just ancient times, but the big question is, how do we get from there to where we are now? He writes things like this, again, answering this question of how do we get from there to here. And he says that Christianity It was what gave every human being value. Without it, some people were valuable, some people weren't. It says Christianity revolutionized sex and marriage, demanding that men control themselves. Christianity confined sexuality to monogamous marriage between one man, one woman. Christianity elevated women to be equals. And in short, Christianity utterly transformed the entire world. It's interesting nowadays, people ridicule Christianity. People look down at Christianity and kind of think that they're better than what Christianity offers. And yet it is Christianity itself that has actually even led to people coming to these claims and these understandings. That it is the source that we cannot get rid of. It is the foundation for our culture. And it continues on. There are many other, popular, predominant, well-spoken, well-respected atheists who are coming up with the same thing. Douglas Murray is another one of those authors and columnists who's an avid atheist, and he says, especially in the last couple years, that the decline of Christianity is a dangerous thing. That he's actually concerned about Christianity going away, even though he doesn't even believe in it. Richard Dawkins, another, probably the most famous atheist, he always kind of called for the demise of Christianity, for it to stop. But now, again, in recent years, he's kind of changed his mind and has actually promoted Christianity as essential for our culture. Now, again, he doesn't believe it himself, and he doesn't believe it to be true, but he still believes it to be good. And another famous person who is a secularist, who doesn't exactly claim to believe in Jesus yet, is Jordan Peterson. A Canadian, someone that you maybe have heard of, who's come to fame in the last 5 years or so. And he's all about just how essential Christianity is. That without Christianity, our world would be in an utter demise and chaos. And so if all these historians and atheists are even talking about the goodness of Christianity and the essentialness, then how much more should we as the church be talking about that? That as a church, we should know that we are essential, that the gospel is what is needed and what is desired by every single person, that it is good news, and good news for all people. It is good news for Christians, but it is also good news for Muslims, for Hindus, for atheists, for anyone of any belief. Jesus himself is the solution to all of our problems. He is what is absolutely necessary, and therefore his church, the ones who bring about his news to people, should also be essential. But let's read the final verdict of Felix in his response to Paul's defense. In verse 22, it says this: "But Felix, having accurate knowledge of the way," he knew about Christianity a decent amount, he said, put off the Jewish leaders, saying, when Caesius, the tribune, comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he would take Paul and keep him in custody, but with some liberties. And that none of his friends, Paul's friends, should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish. That's probably how he knew a lot about Christianity. And he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Jesus Christ. And as Paul reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, "Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you again." At the same time, he hoped that money would be given to him by Paul. And so he sent for Paul often and conversed with him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Fetus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So we kind of get a mixed response from Felix. He's trying to kind of please both parties. He sees the validity of what Paul is saying. He doesn't see it as a plague, but he also doesn't want to start his own plague with the Jews in their uproar. And so he kind of appeases both. He tells the Jews, like, no, I'm not gonna punish Paul. I'm not gonna kill him. I'm not gonna execute him. But he will stay in prison. But then on the other side, he keeps talking with Paul. He gives him liberties. He gives him freedoms that people can come still see him, that his letters can continue to go out. And so in this kind of framework, we see this. And I wanted to focus here at the end on Paul's responses. I think he has two key responses. The first is with Felix. Paul continues to reach out to Felix. He continues to talk with him about the gospel. And realize this, right? Felix already knows a lot about the gospel. He's rejected it a number of times. Even in the story here, it tells us that he hears the truth about Jesus, about the coming judgment, about that you need to believe in Jesus in order to receive salvation. He talks about self-control and the need to follow God's way and not what our heart tells us to do. Right? He's hearing these things and he rejects them, and yet he's constantly calling Paul back. And what does Paul do? Does Paul give up? No, he continues to share the gospel. He continues to try to convince Felix that the good news is good, even for Felix. And the thing is, like the amazing kind of thing is, that it goes on for 2 years. Paul doesn't give up. Paul keeps pushing on. He keeps trying to convince Felix of this. It doesn't look like he succeeded, but we really don't know. And then the second response to Paul is that he uses these liberties that have been given to him to continue to advance the gospel. He doesn't wallow in prison. In fact, he uses it to continually drive this cause to prove not just to Felix, but into the entire world that the good news of Jesus is in fact good. And so we see in Philippians chapter 1, he writes about this. He says, I want you to know, brothers, the other church, he says, what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. It's not for himself. He is there to defend Jesus. And most of the brothers, having becoming confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. And so in the same way, Paul's imprisonment was used, again, to demonstrate just how good the good news is. If Paul could stay in prison and still be filled with joy, with rejoicing, still be driven on his mission to expand the gospel, even though he's in prison because of that, like that's a true testimony of the good news of Jesus. And so that's what I wanted to leave us with. This is the mission for us this week. That we, that you, that me, we all as a church would continue on this mission to show people that the good news is in fact good. Now, for our neighbors next door, for our neighbors down the street, no matter what they believe, no matter what their situation is, no matter what their history is, that the good news is good news for them. That Jesus is the answer to all of the problems. That Jesus, by his death and his resurrection, has freed us from our sin, freed us from our desires to do evil, has made us this ability to change and actually become good by the power of God. That is actually for ourselves given us this ability to overcome death itself. And that is only because of Jesus that we can face satisfaction in this world, can face perfection and growth in this world, that we can face this reality of living this good, abundant life that Jesus came to give us now, and then ultimately live it in eternal life with God forever. Again, Jesus is the good news. And so we first need to start with ourselves. Do we believe that? Do we believe that we couldn't live a day, an hour, a minute, a second without Jesus? Is Jesus essential? And convince yourself of that so deeply. Think back, think deeply on that. And then when you are so convinced of it, that is when it just oozes through us, where we will want to then tell everyone else that the church is essential, that Jesus is essential, that this good news is essential. And so it doesn't matter what our government thinks. It doesn't matter what our neighbors think. What matters is the truth. What matters is what we think. Do we believe it is true? Do we believe that it is essential? Because once we do, it is our mission to go and defend the faith, go and defend Jesus, go and show to people with our lives, with our actions, with our words, with both of our words and our actions working together to go and show people that Jesus is in fact good and really good for them. Let me pray that the church, that the Meadows Church would be this beacon of light here in this neighborhood of Church of Meadows and the whole city, that they would look at us and say they have something we don't. that they have the good news, that they have something that I need. It is our mission, your mission, my mission, to make sure to convince our neighbors that they want this, that they need this, that Jesus is the good news that they have been waiting all their life for. God, we just thank you that you are the good news, that you are the good news incarnate, that Jesus Christ, you came down to live and speak and show us the truth, that you are the truth, the way, and the life. And no one gets the Father, no one gets the goodness except for through you. And you have given us, the church, this mission to go and share this message and defend it like Paul does. God, that we would point people to understanding that you are the solution to all of our problems. And so, God, may we do that. May we realize that in our own lives first, that you are essential, that we need you every moment of every single day. But then I pray for us to communicate that with our words and our actions, working together to tell our neighbors and our citizens and our government, God, that they need Jesus. And if they're looking for enjoyment and satisfaction and hope and help, that all of those things can ultimately be found in you. And so we pray that, God, you would use the Meadows Church to be that beacon of light, that city on a hill, that you would use each individual one of us, God, to pour out that example. That, God, you are good. Your good news is good, and it is good for every single person on this planet. And we just pray this on your name. Amen. So is the gospel of Jesus Christ essential? Yes, a big yes. And we know that as Christians. Hopefully you're more and more convinced of that every day. But at the same point in time, it is our responsibility to show that to our neighbors, to our city. Even though they don't probably naturally believe it, we want to show them that that is what they want and need, and it is good for them and our country. And so that is your mission for this week. Do that in whatever way you possibly can, whether it's with one neighbor, whether it's with many, whatever God leads you to do. We're praying for you to first understand that good news is good, and it is good for every single person that may hear it. And so we're praying for you this week. We love you. We thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's always a special time to gather together, even if it is online. And we're going to be praying for you this week and excited to see you throughout the week in our missional communities, but also on next Sunday as well. So you join us back here online at themeadowschurch.ca. We'll see you again soon.